program is brought to you by P. Murphy & Associates, successfully providing IT professionals to Southern California businesses.
Hi, this is Marlene Gibb with What Do You Do? And my guest today is Dan Layne. And Dan, what do you do?
Marlene, I teach balance and mobility. I'm a balance and mobility specialist. I work primarily with older adults, meaning people over the age of 50. And
that's not yeah, right. Yes, okay.
Well, we have to draw a line somewhere.
Oh, yeah, right.
So.
Over 50, go on.
Yeah, and so the essential issue is that falling is a huge health problem across the United States. There are many families where, as the parents are aging, they begin to fall, and this becomes an issue for the children. It becomes an issue in terms of the way it restricts the freedom of any person who is experiencing that in their life. And so gradually over the last 20 years, a discipline has emerged that has an evidence-based structure to it, which has allowed us to begin to work with people and improve their balance. And a big part of that is the fact that if a person is falling, this is not a normal part of aging. This is an abnormality.
Really? Because it's treated like it's a normal part of aging. Because people say, well, I fell and I broke my hip. I broke my wrist. It's usually the hip, isn't it?
Hip is the most common.
Hip is the most common, and it seems like that's very common. So it's, in this country, when you age, there's all these, what's the word? People see you as getting older, and we don't want to get older, and we don't deal with it, and a lot of things we do not deal with. Have you noticed that?
Right, and it's a stereotyping, and actually the specific term is ageism. There's a tendency to ascribe certain events to the fact that, oh, well, he's just getting old, she's just getting old. And this becomes a problem also because a person, an individual, falls, doesn't tell anybody, perhaps.
Oh, really?
And thinks, oh, well, I'm getting on in years, I guess that's just normal. So they don't talk about it. And the fact is, it's not normal. And the fact is, it can be treated in many cases.
And this has been 20 years this movement is coming because the baby boomers are aging.
That's right, that's right. So it coincides with the baby booming aging phenomenon, and it's gradually, and it's coincident with this fitness movement. There's a lot more activity out there, and people are beginning to realize the value of movement. And so that joins very nicely with balance and mobility as a discipline, because the balance and mobility discipline has been saying for years, movement is the key. It's the key to sustaining balance, but beyond that is the key to sustaining vitality in your life.
Oh yeah, when you sit at a desk all day, I mean, that is so unhealthy to me. Let's get back to you. Now let's start at the beginning, because I know you, and I know this, how I want to weave your story, because I think it's an interesting story. So you went to school for health sciences?
Right, I majored in health sciences. Okay. And a few years prior to that, when I was about 11 years old, I became interested in martial arts. And part of that was I began to study Tai Chi Chuan. And so I began early in my life to develop a sensitivity to balance, because martial arts is very much involved with balance, mental and physical. Mm-hmm. And so essentially, all of those years, I developed an eye for it, an intuition for stability in another person's body. That's what happens to a person when they train in martial arts. Tai Chi Chuan refines that receptivity to another person's state of physical balance.
Okay, now explain that in simpler terms. Okay, how do you know if somebody is off balance? I mean, just a regular person. How would you know that? Essentially,
you can see it in their posture.
Okay.
You can sense it in the level of tension in their body. And then there are certain telltale signs, for example, shortening of the steps when the person walks, shuffling the feet,
okay,
looking down more. Those are classic signs.
They're looking down because they're afraid they're going to fall or they don't know where they're going?
They're tending to take shorter steps, and so they're prone to tripping a little bit more, and so they begin to look down a bit more to see the space in front of their feet. And so all of this comes together to actually increase their risk of falling, because they then don't see what's further ahead.
Because they're too focused this way.
Yes, so now they're not thinking ahead, and they're taken by surprise. That's one of the scenarios, but it's common.
Okay, and then so this is at 11 years old, you started getting this intuitive, you can't verbalize it. I don't think at 11 years old you could verbalize it.
No.
You just kind of knew it, right?
It's a thing you develop a feel for as you work with other people, and in martial arts, including Tai Chi, you practice throwing people around and getting thrown. So again, you develop a feel for dynamic balance.
All right,
Yeah.
Then you got to the health sciences. Now, why the health sciences?
The health sciences, because I was interested in science. The martial arts had led me into a closer relationship with my body. I was teaching at that point. When I went into college, I was teaching classes, so I was dealing with people who were getting injured. So I began to have to increase my database of understanding about injury, physiology, training, the mechanics of training. I was training and active in competitions, so I had to understand something more about sports medicine. And so these pieces just began to come together.
Yeah, let me say they're like going on the same path.
Yeah, they came in and began to create a line.
Yeah, where you're going. So, because most people have a zigzag line, but yours is pretty straight in some ways. In a way, I always feel it's straight, so that's my perception of it. So you went to school, and then you majored in health science, and you got into programming.
Right.
In the medical.
Yeah, like many people, several things occurred in my life, and I took a couple of turns here and there.
Right.
But I eventually settled into a job for a while. I got a job programming at USC School of Medicine. And so I was on the medical teaching side, so I was, again, exposed to that, and so I took advantage of that exposure and continued to take classes there, so I was able to study the full anatomy course. So I took advantage of those available elements and kept building my own knowledge, and gradually, while I was doing that, I was also teaching on the side. And then at some point, it occurred to me, and I really couldn't say quite why, but one day I thought, I wonder if there is a discipline that deals with balance, because the words were coming out of my mouth when I was teaching, and I was thinking more and more about balance. And so then I went looking for a discipline, and I discovered, well, there is a discipline. And the hub of that discipline is at Cal State Fullerton, and they have a program. So I went down and enrolled in it as soon as I found out about it, and became certified as a specialist in balance and mobility.
And that was a tough course, because you were, what, 1 to 2 years you were in?
That's about overall, it's about a 1-year course. And
full time though?
Well, you have to take a bunch of different modules. You have to take some gerontology, physiology. You have to have a background. Like my science background it paid off there.
And your medical background
Right.
Probably paid off, because
Right.
somebody like me going into a program like that, I'd have to learn all that.
Yeah, you may have had to, go to other places to bring in those pieces that you didn't have.
Right.
So it just, yes, it fit, and it came together, and from there, then I began to go out and look for jobs teaching specifically as a balance instructor, and that began to cascade, and that's where I am now. I'm at a point now where I have so many people coming, looking for classes or personal instruction, that I'm at a limit.
Right, and so now you started your own business.
Right.
Which is very exciting.
Yeah, right.
And you're launching it.
That's right.
Which is great. And I thought this would be a good show for you to launch it on and tell us all about it, because you are a Monrovian, which I want to mention that you do live in Monrovia. And you go to people's houses too now? Are you going to be working? Are they going to be coming to your studio? How are you going to do this?
I established a business called the Center for Balance and Mobility. Presently, I teach through junior colleges. I'm on faculty through North Orange County and through Cerritos. I have contracts through cities. I go to people and teach privately as essentially a personal trainer, balance trainer. And so my business is really a conglomeration of all of those, and I'm beginning to think more in terms of establishing a physical center, but I'm not there yet, and I'm not sure when that's going to happen.
So when someone calls you, give me a scenario when they want somebody to come to the house. It's usually probably the daughter or the son who calls.
Frequently a family member.
Okay.
Hears about me, usually through word of mouth, will call me and say, my father or my mother is having problems with balance. They've fallen a couple of times. Can you help? Is there something you can do? It's a similar scenario in my classes. A person walks in and says that they saw that there was a balance class available and they've been feeling a little uncomfortable lately in the way they move around. They've been avoiding steps. They're not comfortable stepping off of curbs. They're not comfortable in an inclined driveway. And so they thought, well, maybe a balance class would help. So sometimes it's through the family, but often it's a person simply knowing, sensing that something isn't right. And now that it's out there, they see it and they identify. They say, maybe I have a balance problem.
Which is hard to admit sometimes. I mean,
yeah, it's hard to admit.
I think as you grow older, those things that you did so easily when you were younger, all of a sudden, you can't do as easily.
One of the most common comments that I get from people is that it's humiliating to fall. People feel extremely embarrassed if they fall, and even in private, but publicly more so. And so that becomes, sometimes that is an encouragement for the person to do something about it, but often it's the opposite. It causes the person to withdraw, to become sedentary. That's worse.
Yeah, yeah, that's far worse.
Right.
So when they come to the house, you screen them and do whatever you need to do, right?
Right. I have some simple assessments that I'll do to gauge their state of mobility, the various systems involved in balance, the inner ear, their vision, their strength, their muscular strength. Muscular strength is the #1 reason that people start having trouble with balance. They get weak in the legs.
Is really?
Yeah.
I thought it would be the inner ear or your perceptions of...
No, it's weakness. That's why inactivity is such a powerful factor in precipitating a balance problem. The legs get weak, the balance starts to go. Then the person becomes fearful, and so they move even less, and the problem gets worse. So the solution is to get moving, and more specifically, perhaps balance training.
And when do they come? Is it age specific? I mean, like, would it happen more in your 70s than your 60s? Or, I mean, I know 50's the starting point of this, but
it's changing. It's changing every year. I'm getting more people in their 50s coming now saying, you know, my dad's having a problem, and I'm realizing that I may be having a similar problem, and so I want to do something about it. Then there's a big spike, definitely in the early 60s, and then there is a big clientele in the mid-70s, 74 to 78, let's say. Maybe skewed a little to the high side, but that's a big population that's in my classes. I've also seen a steady increase in the number of people over 80 and a steady increase in the number of people in their 90s who want to maintain. Generally in their 90s,
my God,
they're there because they're in reasonably good shape, but they want to keep it that way.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a phenomenon.
And how big, when you teach the classes, how big are your classes?
My classes range anywhere from 8 people to 20. When I get over 12, I generally bring in an assistant.
Right, because you have to watch all the movements of people. And what you're teaching, you have to be aware of a lot of subtleties within the body. To me, that's just
Right.
just small movements, and you can probably tell something's not right.
You can feel it, but it's also, you have to maintain a real high state of vigilance. In some ways, it reminds me of teaching kindergarten in the amount of awareness that needs to be spread out in the room. And you also have to maintain proximity, because if somebody starts to fall, you have to be able to get to them. So there's a definite balance in the balance class.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And individually, when someone, why would they come individually? Because they can't drive anymore, or the family wants them
Right.
at work at home, or?
Yeah, generally if it's an individual, I'm going to go to them. I will go to their home because it's not convenient for them to come to a location, transportation. But I would say that often it's also because they don't want to be seen by other people. They're embarrassed about their problem. And I try to encourage people to step out, to step into a class, because mixing with other people is so powerful. A lot of my students live alone. They're
Right.
in their mid-60s, 70s, they've lost their partner, they're living alone, and so
They isolate themselves.
They're isolated, that's right.
And they won't talk about anything
That's right.
because they're too embarrassed. But when they're in a class where they see other people doing things that they feel uncomfortable, but I guess they must feel better that they're all of a sudden not alone with this.
Yeah, they see people solving the same problems that they're facing, and suddenly it's a shared problem. And often in a class, that will be the first time a person admits that they've fallen. And by the way, my balance classes have to adhere to HIPAA compliance, which means that everything that goes on in the class is confidential.
Oh, really?
Right.
You're under HIPAA?
That's right. So if a family member asks, how's it going, I will say, fine. But if a student admits to me that they've fallen, that's not information that I can pass outside of the class without their consent. Because frequently the fear is, if the family finds out that they've had a fall, the family will intervene and begin to restrict their independence. And independence is one of the most precious gifts that we have.
And they resent it.
They resent it. That's
They
right.
don't want anybody. They don't. The biggest thing is they do not want to go into assisted living, unless they decide they want to go into
Right.
assisted living. I mean, sometimes they come to the conclusion, this is what I have to do.
Right.
But most of them do not want to do that. They want to keep.
No.
They want to stay in their homes.
That's right. And there's a deeper piece to this, because movement is our primary means of expression. An actor uses movement to bring forth a character. We raise an eyebrow, we spread our hands, we posture, everything we do. Our voices move air over the vocal cords.
Right.
Movement is the primary expressive device. So when a person starts to have restriction in movement, loss of balance, one of the things that's happening is that person's ability to express themselves is being restricted, and that is frustrating. They don't feel that. They don't recognize that as a root problem, but it is. And sometimes people grab me in the middle of a balance session and they'll say, this isn't really me. What you see here isn't me. A year ago, I was totally different, and I understand it.
Do they feel humiliation and shame with it too?
They feel humiliated, they feel ashamed, they're embarrassed frequently about their bodies, but simultaneously, because they're doing something about it, there's often a sense of elation because they're taking control, they're regaining that independence. And so it can be powerful, it can be life-changing.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can, because I know I have an aunt in Leisure World, and she's 88. And she's mental, and she goes to her exercise class 2 days a week. She said it's very, very important that she gets to that exercise class so she moves.
Right. Well, a lot of the couples that come to my classes, one of the things that's happened in their lives, let's say this is a couple that's in their early 70s, they will reprioritize their lives. They make a decision. I've seen this over and over again. exercise, movement becomes the high priority, and so they begin to schedule all of their other activities, including their doctor's appointments, around
Their exercise.
their exercise. And that's...
I can understand that.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, I do, because I exercise, and I definitely do it. It's in my book when I exercise or when I'm going to take a walk. I'm conscious of that.
Yeah, and what we try to encourage in balance training is that when a person comes for balance training, frequently they're coming to deal with an acute issue. They're falling. They don't feel comfortable with their balance. By the time they come out of the class, what I try to do is make the person more aware that they're developing strategies to continue to refine their movement, to continue to train their bodies for the rest of their lives. And so often people will repeat the class 2 times, 3 times. Some people become regulars.
Right, but the movements, I imagine, because I know you with Tai Chi are probably very small. They're not these huge movements that they're doing. They're little movements.
Some of the exercises, a typical movement in a balance class is to stand up and sit down in the chair multiple times. There are a lot of gait patterns.
And straight down, right?
Right, straight down. There's a bunch of different gait patterns where we have people manipulate their feet. I bring in equipment. I have a little obstacle course that simulates hopping rocks over a stream. So there's a lot of movement. But it
sounds like fun, though.
It's fun. It is, and that's an important point.
It doesn't feel like what you're saying is, okay, I'm going to go and do my aerobics today in my 10 jumping jacks. And
No,
okay,
it's fun, and that's right. It's interesting, and when you start to understand what you're doing to your body, it even becomes more interesting.
Well, the way, I mean, if you're jumping across rocks like you're doing, you all of a sudden start noticing your balance. Are you stronger on the right side or the left side? I mean,
right.
Those things would come up pretty quickly, right?
That's right. Or walking a figure-8 pattern, a person discovers very quickly where they're out of balance when they're turning a circle. Okay, and I should emphasize that we don't jump the rocks, we step. I wouldn't want the viewers to be uncomfortable.
No, you step gently.
Right, and safety is always the highest priority, but what we do is we build a progressive routine. So we start with strengthening, flexibility, gradually adding more components of the balance system, and finally, of course, the most important part of the balance system is the mind.
Yeah, it's got to start here.
Yeah, and so people feel that when they do a balance class, they feel mentally sharper because it's all about integration.
Well, with your Tai Chi background, too, you know how to integrate all of, I mean, you don't separate it out.
Right, mind, body together.
Yeah, yours is always the mind, body. I mean, some people separate. That you're going to come to a balance and mobility class, but it may not be a balance and mobility class where you have the full integration with your background, because your background's very strong with the mind, body, spirit, and any of the martial arts are always together.
Yeah, as a teacher, when I'm looking at a student, right, I'm thinking holistically.
Right.
Right.
You're not putting them, okay, their balance is here and something is here. They're just all kind of, the whole thing flows together as one person.
Yeah, and when I work with a person, I talk to them. I ask them, what kind of work have you done? You know, what's your life like? What was your physical life like? Many people will say, I was never athletic. And yet, when you talk to them, you find out that they had a very physical life, but they never thought of it as athletic.
Right, because sometimes your physical, I mean, when you're active, you're running in and out. Even my girlfriend retired, and she said, I'm busier now. She says, I don't know how I sat at a desk for 8 hours a day.
Right.
She says, it's amazing. I could never do that now.
Right.
But it's not the physical activity we think of as physical activity.
Right. And as we get older, the important thing is to realize that variety, the games we played as children, gave us a variety of movement. We moved from side to side, up and down, back and forth. And that's what we tend to lose as we get older. We don't move side to side as much. That's a critical part of balance.
That's true.
Right, and so we bring back the games. That's why it's fun. We throw balls. We play volleyball with balloons. But there's a very serious purpose underneath, because falling can be deadly. And so everybody in that room knows that while we're laughing and having a good time, we're working on a serious problem.
So you try to combine the holistic with, you try to make it fun.
Right.
They don't want to come into class and think, oh God, I've got this taskmaster. No.
I'm not a drill sergeant. And my primary goal is to get them to think, to get people to be aware. If you can feel your body more intensely, you can feel when it's out of balance.
Oh yeah.
Right. So prevention is the most important part, and awareness.
And you have a book too.
Right, I have a book.
Talk about your book.
It's a fully illustrated book. There's over 300 illustrations. It's called Better Balance. It's got 60 exercises, many of the exercises that we do in class, but all of these can be done at home. And I've got 12 different routines that you can combine, or you can make up your own, and it's filled with information on how to get up off the floor, because many people worry about getting up off the ground. Information on resources, how to make your home a little more balance safe, information on basic behaviors that can create a bit more of a risk in us for balance. And yet it's not about restricting your life. It's simply about living an aware life and paying attention to your body.
How long, in the book, how long are these exercises?
Oh, each routine could be completed in 30 minutes, but I encourage people to break them down so that a 10-minute session is absolutely sufficient. So you have a lot of freedom with it once you know how to work with the pieces, and they're simple exercises.
Like sitting up and down in the chair?
Moving your ankles. It's what we do all the time. It's normal human movement, but we need to make sure we cover the whole spectrum.
Yeah, but if people, lots of times if they're very sedentary, they don't do a lot of these things.
That's right. So I talk about motivational issues. I talk about how to think about moving your body, how to integrate exercises with the things you do all the time, so that in a sense you don't have to do a special exercise. You can combine these things. You can stand at the sink and wash the dishes and work 3 or 4 hip exercises at the same time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to wrap up. And thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You.
That's really, really interesting. I want you to give your name, your telephone number, and your website.
My name is Dan Layne. I can be reached at 626-253-7176. My website is danlayne.com.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for being here. This is Marlene Gibb with What Do You Do?
This program was brought to you by P. Murphy & Associates, successfully providing IT professionals to Southern California businesses.